Hello and good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Cafecito con Courage. Tonight, we'll be talking about the 2025 California Special Election coming on November 4th. Without further ado, Congress may not be working, but we are. So I'd like to start out by playing Three Truths and a Lie, which is just me. I'm just going to play by myself. 1, GOP policies, including the recently passed budget bill, are wildly unpopular. Unpopular, that's the word. 2, GOP-led states have been asked and are actively working on redistricting for their congressional maps to ensure Republicans not only maintain their control, but actually increase their stronghold in Congress. And 3, California is a safe blue state. My vote doesn't matter, and what happens in California doesn't really matter. And 4, I've been drinking cafecito since I was 4 years old. Want to guess which one the lie is? If you guessed that what happens here in California doesn't matter, you guessed right. That is the lie. One could even argue that this might be one of the more significant elections for both the state and the nation, and Californians have the power. At this point, we've been inundated with mailers and ads, and we know the special election is coming. Voters will soon decide on a California constitutional amendment that would adopt new congressional district maps. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of mixed messages about what Prop 50 is or isn't, what it means to California voters, and what impacts it will have in our diverse communities. But the truth is, it will have impact, and it will impact Californians across various issues. Courage California has brought together leaders from throughout the state who serve our diverse communities. Because if you haven't heard, Latinos will likely decide the fate of Prop 50. Shortly, we will be hearing from Communities for a New California, IE United, and Chispa. But first, we want to hear from you. And to do that, I have prepared a poll. So we want to hear from you. What are your top issues, especially when you think about going into this special election on November 4th? And while everybody starts doing their polling before we show the results to everybody, I also want to quickly introduce our next speaker, who is Irene Cao, the Executive Director here at Courage California, who will be giving us a bit more background on just what Prop 50 is and how we got here. So I'll go ahead and give everybody a second to vote on that. So just a quick glance at these poll results: affordable housing, immigration, voting rights. Those are our top 3 we have in this room with us here today. Saving democracy, we didn't add that, but yes, saving democracy. Thank you, Wendy. So I think we'll be able to touch on all these pieces tonight. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to our Irene Cao, our Executive Director here at Courage.
Thank you, Angela. And good evening, everyone. So I guess the other option is all of the above. So as Angela mentioned, all of our speakers will touch on how Prop 50 is going to affect each of these issues. And also, we also recognize, and I know a lot of you on this call also recognize, all of these issues are related and connected to each other. So I hope you already know a little bit about Prop 50. And I also hope that by now that you have received your ballots. So I know folks have been getting their ballots from across the state over the last week. And so voters are already making their choices on this really important election. And we now have just a little over 20 days to make sure that every single voter here in California understands what's at stake with Prop 50, understands what it is, and turns in their ballot by November 4th. So a couple other key dates that I want to mention as well. So October 20th, So just in a couple weeks, October 20th is the last day to register to vote for this election. Though I do want to mention that same day registration is available as well. On October 25th, vote centers are going to be open for early in-person voting in 29 of the 58 states. So the 29 of the 58 counties, excuse me, in the state. So the states that are Voters' Choice Act counties will have vote centers. And then, of course, as already mentioned, November 4th, that is the big election day. So every ballot needs to be dropped off or sent in by that date to be counted for this election. So really quickly, let me just cover how we even got here. So just a couple months ago, President Trump instructed Texas state Republicans to redraw their congressional lines to gain up to 5 Republican seats for the 2026 midterm elections. And this is because usually what happens is the party that's not in power in the White House in the midterm usually gains seats in the midterm election. And polling has shown, after poll, has shown that President Trump and the Republican agenda, especially around cuts to healthcare, cuts to affordable housing, other kinds of cuts, have been really unpopular. And so there is a lot of concern from Trump and the Republicans that they are going to lose control of the US House of Representatives. So essentially, what Trump and these Texas Republicans did was redraw their congressional maps in the middle of this decade to gain up to 5 seats. And what's really notable was that Texas had already drawn their maps in a way to favor Republicans. And so by redrawing their maps, they have done that even more. And really specifically, the new lines that they have drawn really minimize the voting power of Black and Latino voters, which is why Texas maps are facing quite a few lawsuits. So in response to Texas redrawing their maps to gain 5 Republican seats, Governor Newsom and other California Democrats proposed new California congressional map to gain up to 5 Democratic seats. So that is what Prop 50 represents. So that proposal now is in front of all voters. So unlike in other states like Texas and other states that are looking to redistrict, California is the one state that is where voters get to have the final say on what our congressional maps look like. So what Prop 50 is, just simply, is it would amend our state constitution to adopt a new temporary congressional district map with lines that will be in effect 2026, 28, and 2030 elections. And then our Independence California Citizens Redistricting Commission will resume drawing new district lines after the 2030 census. And then every 10 years on their usual schedule. So this is what the Independent Redistricting Commission has done since it was established in 2010 for congressional districts, and that's the schedule that they'll continue. So really quickly, just to give a quick snapshot of sort of who's in support and who's opposing Prop 50, because this is important as well. So because, of course, Prop 50 is about congressional district lines and about parties and partisanship, the support for yes on Prop 50 is really coming from a lot of California and national Democrats. And so obviously that includes Governor Newsom, who's leading the yes on Prop 50 official campaign here in the state. But it also includes former President Barack Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who some folks may have seen has started to appear in some of the Yes on Prop 50 videos. But the coalition is really broad in terms of the Yes on Prop 50. So unions and community groups are also part of the Yes on Prop 50 coalition. So that includes unions like SAU California, the California Labor Federation. It also includes groups like Planned Parenthood affiliates of California and California Working Families Party, and of course the groups that are here speaking on tonight's call. So again, a broad coalition that represents a wide and diverse group of Californians. Now, in terms of who's opposing Prop 50, that is also kind of what you would expect. So there are California National Republicans, And most prominently, I think folks may have started seeing some ads or some quotes from former Governor Schwarzenegger. And a lot of this is being backed and funded by Republican mega donor Charles Munger Jr. Now, Schwarzenegger and Munger Jr. helped to establish the Independent Redistricting Commission. And so for them, this is about protecting the commission, but also because they're Republicans, and especially for Munger, who's a Republican donor, there's also a bigger play here too. So that's a sense of who's supporting and opposing Prop 50. But as we think about Prop 50, this is also a fight that's a lot bigger than the parties or separate from the parties. Really, for Californians, Prop 50 is about fighting against the Trump administration, fighting against the policies that attack and harm our communities. And a yes on Prop 50 is also about how we fight for communities and for the policies that keep us safe. So our different speakers will dive a little bit more about what Prop 50 means on the issues and for the regions that they represent. And so with that, I'm really excited to introduce Montse Sanchez from Communities for a New California. Montse?
Yeah, thank you, Irene. All right, so at CNC, we always have like a super hyper focus on Latinos, but specifically Latina women, because we know when a Latina goes out to vote, she'll most likely pull out her entire family. So I'd like to start off by mentioning that Latinas are the power behind California's future, and Proposition 50 reminds us of why representation matters. So Prop 50 is California's response to the Trump administration and congressional Republicans' attempt to silence Latino, Asian, and Black families by having states like Texas, Florida redistrict and add more Republican-controlled districts to eliminate the power of people of color. If we don't respond by voting yes on Proposition 50, California could lose power in Washington, D.C., and people of color could really be hurt. While states like Texas, Ohio, and Florida gain more seats through racial gerrymandering. So just to add some numbers of like registration, 1 in 6 registered voters in California is Latina, but looking at it super hyper locally in the San Joaquin Valley, 1 in 5 registered voters is a Latino, which is about 505,000, a little over. And so together, all of these women, so it's 3.2 million women that hold the power to decide who represents us in Washington, D.C. But we can't forget about no party preference voters because that registration has also increased, so much so that there are now 4.8 million no party preference voters in the state. And Latinos make 30% or 1.5 million of that no party preference voter population. And I wanted to add some historical context as to like what really got us here, right? Because I think Proposition 50 and gerrymandering isn't such a common term, right? Like, well, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And so to get here, we have to kind of look back at history. So since 1934, in 20 out of the last 23 midterm elections, the party in power of the White House has lost seats. And that's not by accident. It's a checks and balance that voters have to be able to tell the president what their opinion is about their job performance. Much like we have different, the 3 branches of government, this is our opportunity to be able to tell the government and the party in control of the White House what we think of their job performance. So currently, it takes 218 votes to control the House of Representatives. Right now, the Republican Party holds 219 seats. And obviously, because of a government shutdown, we know that they haven't been able to really hone in on the power that they do hold. So thus leads to, President Trump telling Governor Abbott in Texas, right, like, get me more seats. Although Proposition 50 is being framed as redistricting, it's really about power and accountability in midterm elections and Trump's attempt to cheat this system, to cheat our opportunity to tell them, we don't like what you're doing, we don't like what your party's doing, so you're going to lose seats. In 2010, during President Obama's presidency, the House lost 63 seats. The Democratic Party lost 63 seats. And in 2018, under Republican control of Donald Trump, they lost 40 seats. So as we can see, the trend shows us that they're most likely going to lose seats, especially when the president's approval rating falls below 50%, which we know has been declining rapidly. So what's happening nationally is a Republican attempt to avoid accountability, to cheat the checks and balances of midterm elections, and keep control of the House of Representatives under the Republican Party. So I'd like to now move into some misinformation that you might potentially be receiving mailers, you might be seeing ads on TV, on the radio. You might hear that this is a power grab, or that, it's cheating the system by changing the maps forever, right? You might hear like, oh, this is violating the Independent Redistricting Commission, Citizens Commission. Prop 50 isn't permanent and it's time limited. A yes vote on Proposition 50 would allow California to use the new proposed congressional maps until 2030. After the 2030 census, which happens every 10 years, California will go back to its usual way of doing business, and the Independent Redistricting Commission will resume map drawing. And then it's important to note that Proposition 50 does not impact state, county, school board, or city maps. It only focuses on those congressional districts. Now I'd like to kind of get into some of the key priorities for us, or just some of the things that might be affected or will most likely be affected if Proposition 50 does not pass. So economic security, we've already seen through the reconciliation budget, right, that there have been many cuts to life-saving programs such as CalFresh, Medi-Cal. If CalFresh is cut, and we can suspect that more cuts will be coming, right? It takes away funds that would go to families, which would then lead them to have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs, right? And leaving kids at home because families have to work, they have to find ways to make ends meet. But it also affects another group of people, farmers and ranchers, right? Small businesses, they could also harm them because they also receive benefits under these types of programs. If you look at healthcare, in California, over 1 million Medi-Cal patients could lose coverage or face stricter requirements. In the Central Valley, a while ago, or a couple years ago, we saw that a hospital was shut down because they didn't have funding, and they were like struggling financially, and people in that area had to commute farther. So again, it's another way to cause harm to our communities, but also in a way, and like kill us, because we are living in healthcare deserts. Voting no on Proposition 50 will allow more cuts to healthcare, Social Security. It would increase tariffs, and it would increase food prices. All working class families will be in danger if we do not react to Trump's attempt to cheat the system. And now I'd like to mention like what a yes vote is. So if we vote yes on Proposition 50, it means that we're fighting against cuts to federal housing programs like rental assistance and affordable housing developments. We're fighting against medical cuts that hurt children, pregnant individuals, seniors, and people with disabilities. We're fighting against increased health premiums, fighting against hospitals and clinic closures. We're fighting against increased grocery costs, fighting against cuts that only benefit corporations and wealthy people. So again, I'd really like to drive this point that we don't want there to be more cuts to healthcare, Social Security, higher tariffs, and higher food prices. Together as Californians, we really need to have this response and hold this responsibility close to our hearts and the issues that we care about, and vote yes on Proposition 50 so that we can react to Trump's attempt to cheat the system and tell him that California will not stand down. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Sky Allen from Inland Empire United.
Thanks, Monse. And thanks everybody for making time to be on this call with us. I just want to start and acknowledge that it's been a really hard year. I don't know a lot of people who've had great years over the past couple of years, so it's worth sending love and my heart out to you all in that regard. But I think it's still true for a lot of us that this year has been especially difficult. And I think it's important to acknowledge and speak aloud the ways in which it's been made harder for us. On day 7 of the year, whole entire communities in Los Angeles burned to the ground. And many of us know folks who lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their communities. Some of us were those people. Some of us have families and loved ones that were those people. And then that moment of tragedy and crisis, aid to help rebuild was withheld from our communities by folks in DC who instead wanted to give that money to their billionaire friends and major corporations when our neighbors and loved ones had just lost everything. We live in one of the most diverse states in the country. I'm sure you are proud. I am proud to be in a community so culturally diverse and involving so many people. I think we are the embodiment of what America could be. We're not all the way there yet. California's got work to do, and we work really hard to do that work. But we're a lot further than a lot of our neighbors. And because of that, we have been under attack from folks in DC who have relentlessly, cruelly, inhumanely been attacking our neighbors, our community members, our family members, maybe ourselves in these raids that have only gotten more intense, less humane, and are getting a blank check to keep doing this to our communities in LA and IE, up and down California and across the whole state for the next many, many years. There's so many examples of these things. We just a couple years ago experienced one of the greatest health crises that we've ever experienced as a country, certainly in our lifetimes. Maybe in the history of our country, we've experienced worse, but not in living memory. And we are even now barely recovering from the impacts of the pandemic. And now the federal government is taking people's health care away and taking people's food assistance away, leaving children going to bed hungry and people who may die because they can't access the health care that they need if and when they get sick. Because at some point we all get sick and need help. These sorts of things are not just tragedies. They're not just instances. They're policy decisions made by people in DC that we all elect. California we don't get our own Congress, right? We have our state legislature that only affects us, but everyone across the whole country is impacted by who everyone sends to Congress. And right now, the majority of people that are there don't have our interest at mind. They're not acting like they care that we're able to pay our bills, take care of our health, raise and take care of our children. They're actively attacking us and stealing our tax dollars and giving them to people who already have more than they could possibly spend. That's our problem. That's all of our problem. It's all of our responsibility. But also, in this year, we actually have an opportunity to do something about it. All of those things I can share. I personally have loved ones who lost their home in the fire. That's a really helpless feeling. You know, we all know people who are scared and maybe even people who were taken by masked ICE raids, kidnapping people on the streets. That's terrifying and inspires fear. After years of struggle, it can inspire helplessness. But I want us to think about Prop 50 as an opportunity to stand up and show leadership, to actually fight back and be part of a dialogue. These are not just things that are happening to us. We can actually say we want something different. There's a lot of talk over the past couple months from people who don't support this proposition that say Prop 50 is politicians drawing lines for each other and it's disenfranchising us and taking away our representation. I would really challenge that and disagree and say this is the first time that you and I are being asked, do you like these maps? Do you want these maps? Will you vote for these maps? That never happens. That doesn't happen in California with all of our leadership. We as voters have never ourselves voted on a map like this. Across the state, or across the country, excuse me, no one has ever been asked, do you support these maps? Do you want to vote for them? But this year, we get to say, I want this map or I want this map. That's incredibly powerful. And it's a conversation about which map would you choose, but at the heart of it, it's who do you trust to make decisions about your lives? Who do you want making decisions about the climate crisis and how we invest in recovering from things like wildfire and drought and air pollution? Who do you want making decisions about your healthcare, your right to go to the doctor, to get help paying out that bill, to feed your children? If you are who's making the decision about how much billionaires and wealthy corporations are paying in taxes and whether or not they're paying us a living wage or they're stealing all of our resources out of our community, right? It's about us. This isn't about the Congress member. This isn't about Newsom. This isn't about Trump. This is about what's at stake for me and my community, and the fact that someone is actually asking for my opinion and my vote, and for me to weigh in to what direction I want my state and my country to go in. It's an opportunity for all of us to show leadership. In the Inland Empire, we have to show some leadership in this moment because the maps that are being presented right now actually taking away a representative from us. And that sucks. We would love to have as much representation of people speaking on behalf of San Bernardino and Riverside counties as possible. But the trade-off of losing one representative for our region or losing 5 representatives for people who care about my rights in this country, it's a very easy choice for me to say, I'll take 1 less representative if I get 5 more actually fighting for my ability to eat and pay bills and be healthy in DC. That's more important to me. That's more important to you. So it's a trade-off I'm willing to make. It's asking us to take some leadership, to believe that a different path is better, and to set up a scenario where we actually are able to fight for better. Voting yes on Prop 50 won't flip a switch and make ICE get off our streets. It won't give all of us housing and healthcare, right? There will still be work to do after that, but it makes it possible to fight and win those fights. If Prop 50 doesn't get passed, it is that much harder to fight for those things for our communities. And that's not a risk right now that I'm willing to take, given how much is already stacked against us. So as I think about what's at stake for me, for my community, for the work that we're doing, it's a no-brainer. We have to pass Prop 50. We have to have as many tools in our toolbox to fight for our communities. And this is an opportunity that maybe we didn't ask for, and maybe we don't necessarily want to vote in odd years, but it's an opportunity to actually be a part of the conversation and have some agency in a year that is stripped of so much of it. So I want to share the mic and also invite my neighbor in Orange County, Boomer from Chispa OC, to talk about what this means for Orange County.
Thank you, Sky. And I also just kind of want to uplift all the previous speakers who are holding it down, just being very real, all women as well. And so, like the power of femme and women is really important. And I'm just really also glad to be here and for folks as well for joining this call. My name is Bulmado Vicente, but folks call me Boomer. Although I'm not a boomer, I just want to make that clear. And I also just kind of want to uplift what Sky said in terms of really this is an opportunity for California and for us really to show leadership. In California, we have the most amount of seats in the House. We have 52 seats in the U.S. House. That's more than some states combined. And so we sort of have like a duty to really tip this scale of accountability And as folks from California, we're known as fighters. Like we are fighting for our communities. We're fighting against ICE. Like we're seeing it out on our streets, in our neighborhoods. And so, really, I think it kind of makes sense for us as Californians really to lead the way, and to stop this Trump regime. And so, as folks mentioned, Prop 50 is going to be impacting various areas across the state. In the IE, as Sky mentioned, they are going to lose one representative. Here in Orange County, we're actually going to be gaining 2 additional districts. So whereas we currently have 6 districts, we're going to be having 8. We have the newly added 41st district, which is Ken Calvert's district. And then we also have 42, which is currently held by Robert Garcia. And so these 2 districts have actually now encompassed parts of Orange County. And some districts have completely changed. My district has changed. I'm now in Robert Garcia's district. And so like I know the costs in terms of like what that means in terms of like losing my old district. But what I also want to emphasize and also know is that a lot of these districts have greater Latino representation, which is really important in order like to make sure that we have centralized working class communities that are able to mobilize and fight for their access and for a representative that is going to be like fighting for them. And so, one of the benefits that I see as part of the redistricting of some of these districts is that it adds greater representation for some of those first communities, including Latino voters. Um, and these communities are going to be really critical towards ensuring that Prop 50 passes. Like first gen Latino, Vietnamese, Black voters. Like a lot of these communities are going to be critical in order to ensure that Prop 50 passes. And so I really just kind of want to assure that working class communities are really the key to ensuring that Prop 50 passes, and making sure that like our neighbors, that our communities, that young folks, that like your tia, that your abuela, that like everyone that is able to vote can and should vote. And what's at stake, folks have mentioned there are multiple things at stake. Um, I would just sum it up that our livelihoods are at stake. We're seeing what this Trump administration is doing, and we're seeing the impact. We're feeling it, and it's scary. And I believe Prop 50 is really an opportunity for us to have a fighter chance for a better world for our communities. Access to safer communities, access to basic needs like food and housing, abortion and immigration, and also just like an opportunity to stop Trump from rewriting history. That emphasis on the fact that like 20 out of the 23 past midterm elections, the party in power has lost seats. This is unprecedented in terms of what Trump is doing. And it's scary. It really shows the aggressive culture and the aggressive rhetoric that this party or that this regime is moving through. And so I also just kind of want to make sure that we're pushing back. And I hope Prop 50 is really the first step for Democrats to have a backbone. Because lately, I am gonna be honest, in terms of there needs to be better by Democrats. And although Prop 50 will give us a fighting chance, when it comes to issues like immigration, like we need Democrats and current congressional Democrats that are gonna be pushing for bolder policies. you know, like right now, the deportation, um, with the $75 billion budget that ICE has, you know, they are now the highest funded law enforcement agency in the country, with the fewest checks on its power. Um, and ICE has a bigger budget than some of the world's military. And that foundation and that groundwork was laid by Democrats. And so, in order for us to really be pushing both policies, we also need to be pushing the Democratic Party and current Democrat representatives like to do better, to vote better. Um, and so I just kind of also just want to up that up and uplift that. Um, and I think lastly, you know, I would encourage everyone to share information in terms of Prop 50. I know not everyone knows what Prop 50 is, or in terms of that there's a current election. I just got my hair cut the other day from like a new barber, and there was a Prop 50 ad that was showing on the TV. And I asked him like, "Hey, like, do you know what's going on, or like what Prop 50 is?" And he was unsure. Like he didn't know. And I think it's really important for us to talk with everyday folks, and let them know the importance of this election, and let them know that, you know, that they have the power like to fight back. And this is their opportunity. And so I can't stress enough in terms of the impact and what's at stake in this election. And I'm just really encouraging folks to let your neighbors know. Us as Chispa, you know, not only are we educating folks online, but we are also doing like a canvassing program where we're talking to voters, we're knocking on doors, and we're letting folks know and encouraging them to vote yes on Prop 50. And with that, I will pass it back to
Yeah,
Angela.
thank you so much. And again, just a reminder, please feel free to drop in any questions you have for any of our speakers here today. We kind of cover a big vast of the state. Courage is a statewide organization. We have CNC really heavy in the Central Valley, up and down the valley. We have IU United, of course, and then Chispa. So we have the state pretty covered. If you have any specific questions about any regions or how Prop 50 will impact in your particular area, I think it's a really good area to ask your questions since we have so much, just a wealth of knowledge right here on this Zoom call today. And with that, I would like to go ahead and pass it over to Isidro Chavez, our communications manager here at Courage, California. As Boomer shared, you know, this is about its community, it's sharing, it's engaging other voters. It's really letting your neighbors know, and talking to your family members, talking to your friends. So I'm going to pass it over to Isidra so she could talk a little bit about making a voting plan and also how to engage other people to do so as well. Isidra?
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Isidra Chavez, and yeah, I'm here to remind you all to make a plan to vote. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides, so hopefully this works. Awesome. It works. Cool. So just as Irene mentioned earlier, the deadline to register to vote is October 20th. So if you know someone who recently turned 18 or someone who maybe recently moved, let them know to register by the deadline and to check their status if they're unsure. You can visit our voter tools website. I linked it here on the screen. So you can register to vote and check your status, and there's some other cool tools there as well. And it's a really good resource to share with first-time voters or anyone who just wants to make sure that their status is up to date. Now, if you've already got your ballot, please schedule some time to go over it with your household. Similar to our Cafecito here today, make sure to actually dedicate some time to talk about Prop 50 and how we got here and what's at stake. And bring it up in the group chat if you have to, which actually reminds me, if you haven't already, please make sure to follow us, Courage California, on socials, because we've put together so many Prop 50 explainers, and you can really easily just reshare them to your story, share them with your friends, with your family, and it really helps to keep your network informed and aware that we have an election, and make people aware that voting yes is just very important for this election. When it comes to talking to your loved ones or your network about Prop 50, some really key things to mention. I think we've covered a lot of them here on this call today, but it's really important to mention how the new maps will be temporary. A lot of people think that they won't be temporary, and that's disinformation. So it's a really good reminder to let folks know that these maps will be temporary, and remind people that the California's Independent Redistricting Commission isn't going to go away, and that MAGA-led Congress would ultimately just lead to bad policy for all of our rights, even here in California. And I'm sure that by now we've all seen the disinformation about Prop 50, and it's really confusing voters. So to share a more in-depth breakdown of why you should vote yes on Prop 50, I definitely recommend sharing our Courage California Voter Guide. It covers how Prop 50 works and debunks some of the most rampant disinformation out there. And then once you've sat down with your household to fill out your ballot, make sure that you make a plan to return it. Now, if you plan to mail your ballot, you should keep in mind the new USPS policy changes. Attorney General Rob Bonta recently shared this post about a change in USPS policy that might affect communities that live more than 50 miles from each of California's 6 regional mail processing facilities. So if you live outside of the 50-mile radius, I'm just out of Sacramento, so that could be my area. Your ballot may not be postmarked the day you actually put it in your mailbox. So please make sure to mail your ballot early, and remind your friends and family to return their ballot early as well. I personally like to return my ballot at my county's election office, but you can also return your ballot at any drop box, polling place, or vote center by November 4th. I also included a link here for you all. If you need help finding your nearest polling place, you can visit the Secretary of State's website. And also, don't forget to sign up for ballot tracking. That way you can get updates on the status of your ballot once you send it. And you also get updates when it goes out. And I just like the peace of mind of knowing that my ballot made it to where it was supposed to be. So 10 out of 10 recommend. Now, I just want to end by reminding you all that our government really works best when it hears from all of us. So gather your friends and family and make returning your ballot a celebration of our right to vote and a celebration of democracy. So make a whole day out of it and get yourselves a little treat after, maybe a little cup of coffee. But before I go, and before this slide goes away in like 3 seconds, I definitely recommend taking a picture of all of these resources here. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Angela.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Isidra. I know I have my way of voting. I'm a sucker for going to the ballot box on the day of, because I just love the tradition, and I'm like, oh, it's voting day. I get to step away from my office, whether or not it even matters if I step away from my office. And I'm gonna get my sticker on voting day, because I'm just into that type of deal. It's the traditionalist in me. But we want to know how you plan on voting now that we've kind of discussed the different ways, specifically this special election, especially knowing that there's going to be some challenges at the voting at the postal service, because yeah, we got postal service things going on now. So go ahead and let us know how you plan on voting, and if you've already voted. I know someone who's already voted, and I don't know, they kind of tell me to make me feel bad, but I don't feel bad. Like, I know how I'm gonna do it. Overachievers in my book. Yes, I love it. We have a lot of folks that like go into the ballot box. I get it. I get it. It's when that's how you've been raised, that's how you've been raised, right? Thank you guys so much for sharing. I appreciate these interactive moments because it gives us an idea to know who we're talking to and what all our plans are. So it helps. It helps. So I'm going to go ahead and remind folks we are about to head into the Q&A section. So if you do have any questions about anything, whether it's Prop 50, whether it's about voting in your county, any myths or things you're hearing in your community that you want to flag or just kind of bring up to the group, now is a great time to do it. So please feel free to start chiming into the chat. Raise your hand if you'd like to. Again, this is a meeting space. And when we do start the Q&A, we will end the recording portion. So your questions will not be recorded. And just kind of lifting up what was said here today about showing up in leadership and showing up in community. I think it's also important to flag that in California, we also need to show up as the state as a leader and the state in community because we are bigger than our individual families, our neighborhoods. We show up for our families, we show up for our neighborhoods, we show up for our state, but we also need to show up for the nation because we're also in a community with this nation. We are part of it. So, it's time for us to do what we need to do to be there to protect not just our community, our immediate communities, but our broader community as well. So it's just a way that we can do that.